To everything there is a season, and a time to every purpose under the heaven. A time to be born, and a time to die. A time to plant, and a time to pluck up that which is planted. A time to kill, and a time to heal. A time to break down, and a time to build up. A time to weep, and a time to laugh. A time to mourn, and a time to dance. A time to cast away stones, and a time to gather stones together. A time to embrace, and a time to refrain from embracing. A time to get, and a time to lose. A time to keep, and a time to cast away. A time to rend, and a time to sow. A time to keep silent, and a time to speak. A time to love, and a time to hate. A time of war, and a time of peace. Hello, I'm Joe Roberts, and this is the Mayfield Friday Time. I've been reading from Ecclesiastes chapter 3, verses 1 through 8.
Well, hello, I'm Joe Roberts, and your host for the Mayfield Friday Time program. And we want to welcome you to our program this evening. With me is our producer, Jamie Roberts. He is at all of the equipment, and you won't see or hear much from him. He's in the background, make sure we're functioning as we ought to. without his talents at the electronics and the sound, this program would not be able to continue. I guarantee you. And we certainly appreciate him. I know I say that every week, but I mean it. Really can't say enough about how precious he is to us and how helpful that he is. All right, we certainly appreciate him. And our co-host, Pastor Bernie Dixon, is with us again this evening. We'll be hearing from him shortly. And online with us is, I think, Brother John is on there, or soon will be anyway. John Scott Raish, he's our guest co-host. And then our other guest co-host, Pastor Dan Curtis, will be with us in the second half of the program. We're so glad you've tuned in to our program this evening, and we have several things lined up for you, and you're going to hear from all the gentlemen that are in the studio with me, and also those that are joining us online, our co-hosts. So our desire is that we may be a blessing to you this evening. We trust that the things that we bring to you will be informative, especially for things this evening that some of the things that we're going to be discussing this evening are very informative, and it affects every one of us, not just God's people. And so that's coming up later on. And as is our custom, here's my co-host, Pastor Bernie Dixon, to give us an overview for this Sunday's message, and then bring us devotion. All right, Pastor.
I am looking forward to this Sunday's message. I don't know how many people will, but it's some important information on unanswered prayer. I know we hear God answered prayer, and I understand that. But there are certain reasons why prayers won't be answered. Even Jesus taught how to pray, and then later on we will see the different situations that will cause our prayers not to be answered. So I would encourage everyone to tune in Sunday morning if you possibly can, and just get this informative information. It sure has helped me out. Then Sunday night I'm going to continue my study on God's Word. We're going to be looking at the King James Version of the Bible, how it came about. Why is it so important? And so that'll be for Sunday evening. I'm still working on the PowerPoint, and I about got that done, and the handout. So again, as we have said, we're not trying to proselyte, but if you're in town in Smyrna and you're looking for some place to go, some churches don't have Sunday evening, just stop by. We would love to have you come.
All right. Very good. Now give us a devotion there, brother.
Okay. Well, this is interesting. I called Brother Joe, and last week we talked about this. But I said in devotion, I'm going to bring some information about historical figures that were so influential and so important to what we now have as Baptist people. And the one that I'm referenced to is a fellow by the name of Ben Bogard. Some of you are probably familiar with him. He wrote a wonderful textbook on the Baptist Way book. He was one of these individuals that kind of like Peter, he wasn't going to let anything stop him from doing the work. But anyway, I want to bring this, and I want to begin our this time in Acts chapter 5, verse number 14 through 19. And if you have your Bibles, follow along. And believers were the more added to the Lord, multitudes, both men and women, insomuch they brought forth the sick into the streets and laid them on beds and couches, that at the least the shadow of Peter passing by might overshadow some of them. There came also of the multitudes out of the cities round about Jerusalem, bringing sick folk and them which were vexed and unclean spirits, and they were healed every one. Then the high priest rose up, and all they that were with him, which are the sect of the Sadducees, were filled with indignation, and they were mad because of the truth that was being preached. But anyway, we're going to move on. And laid their hands on the apostles and put them into common prison. But the angel of the Lord by night opened the prison doors and brought them forth and said, Go stand and speak in the temple in the temple to the people all the words of this life. And when they heard that, they entered into the temple early in the morning and taught. But the high priest came, and they that were with him, and called the council together, all the senate of the children of Israel, and sent to the prison to have them brought. But when the officers came, they found them not in the prison. They returned and told, saying, the prison truly found we shut with all safety, and the keepers standing without before the doors. But when we had opened, we found no man within. Now when the high priest and the captain of the temple and the chief priests heard these things, they doubted of them whereunto this would grow. Then came one and told them, saying, behold, the men whom you put in prison are standing in the temple and teaching the people. I've got to chuckle at that. That didn't keep them from doing what God had them to do. And you're going to find out where this kind of lines up with Ben Bogard in just a moment. So anyway, we go on. Then went to the captain of the officers that brought them without violence, for they feared the people, lest they should have been stoned. And when they had brought them, they set them before the council, and the high priest asked them, saying, did we not straitly command you that you should not teach in this name? And behold, you fill Jerusalem with your doctrine. I like that, with your doctrine. I'm going to say this. It wasn't the disciples' doctrine. This was Jesus Christ's doctrine. And these were Baptist missionaries. Anyway, no wonder people don't like Baptist people. They're going to tell it like it is. And intended to bring this man's blood upon us. Then Peter and the other apostles answered and said, we ought to obey God rather than men. What a wonderful testimony. And with that, I want to bring a kind of a history of Ben Bogard in Alabama. This was put out by Brother David Gregg. Some of us know Brother Joe, you know Brother David Gregg.
Yes, sir.
Great historian. He loves the Civil War, but he did a marvelous work on this about Ben Bogard. But he said this: Benjamin Marcus Bogard was born on March 9th, 1868 in Hardin County, Kentucky. He was born in a small log cabin near Elizabethtown to M.L. Bogard and Nancy English. His father had fought for the Confederacy in the Civil War just a few years before his birth. They were not wealthy people, but determined and had great faith in God. Around 1873, the family moved to Caseyville, located in Union County, Kentucky. There he played on the banks of the Ohio, watching the steamboats churn the water as they made their way to some far-off destination. He also watched the building of the Woodland Baptist Church. This church fellowshipped in the Union County Association of United Baptists and the Southern Baptist Convention. And as you will recall, the term United Baptist began when regular Baptists and separate Baptists were united. Those in Kentucky were true missionary Baptists and included men like J.R. Graves and J.N. Hall. I've got to learn more about this fellow by the J.N. Hall. There's a lot of information out there. J.R. Graves, one of the great landmarkers who stood firm on what we believe. But anyway, it goes on further. At the age of 17, Bogard, this is Ben Bogard, rode his horse to the Woodland Baptist Church to hear the preaching of Elder J.B. Hayes of Morganfield, Kentucky. He listened very closely to what the man of God had to say, and on his way home, those words kept burning in his heart. He knew what he had to do, and right there on his horse, he accepted Christ as his Lord and Savior. Now, I want to give a footnote. Nobody had to tell Ben Bogard to repeat some kind of prayer. I've been studying where this idea, and shame on people when they get people to say, just repeat a prayer after me. They may say repent, but if this is repeating a prayer, for the most part, they're just saying it to accomplish something. But Ben Bogard, he had heard the gospel, rode away from where he heard the gospel, and on his horse, he accepted Jesus Christ as personal Savior. I want to move on a little bit further. To him, baptism was not an option. Amen. And thought it was, in fact, though it was February, he presented himself as a candidate for baptism. In February of 1885, Elder D.J. Longston plunged him into the icy waters of baptism. By the way, I'm never going to complain about our baptistry if the heater's not working. But anyway, let me get this back a little bit of history. that when you go up and down the trail, especially up here, you'll hear terms like Running Water Baptist Church or Muddy Creek Baptist Church. These churches didn't have heated baptistries, Brother Joe. They baptized by the river where they were.
Wherever there was water.
Wherever there was water. In fact, I've got to say this. I was doing a revival in Mississippi, and the pastor, he said, I want to show you something. He took me around, and a lot of the Baptist churches over there, they would not have baptistries in their churches, because to them it wasn't scripture unless the water was running like it was in the Jordan River. But that's not here. And I had to chuckle over that. But I like it where it said, I believe it was Peter went to go talk to the Ethiopian, and all he was concerned with, is there enough water? So soon after this conversion, and we go on, soon after his conversion, this has been Bogard felt the call of God upon him to preach the gospel. He was licensed to preach by the Woodland Church in August of 1887. In that same fall, he entered Georgetown College in Georgetown, Kentucky. There he was taught Greek, Latin, English, and other subjects on such as math and science. His Greek teacher was Professor S.C. Mitchell, who later became the son-in-law of A.T. Robertson. You've heard of A.T. Robertson.
Yes.
By the way, there was something unusual about Brother Ben Bogard, which we'll find out brought a disadvantage to the Church of Christ people, and it was this, that Ben Bogard was very educated. And he knew the languages. Then go a little bit further. This will come up in just a minute. In 1888, he returned home with his pastor's leadership. He began preaching on a regular basis. He began holding revivals, and many came to hear him preach. It was during this time that Bogard was holding a revival at Walnut Bottoms in Henderson County, Kentucky. And at the age of 20, Bogard was to hold a protracted meeting in a schoolhouse. Nearby was a store owned by a man by the name of Baker. He invited Bogard to stay with him. Unknown to Bogard, Baker was a bootlegger and hoped that the meeting would bring many out to hear the young preacher and afterward buy his whiskey. It's going to get kind of comical, but it's the way it was. And as the meeting progressed, many came to know the Lord and quit buying the liquor. An arm of the church at Smith Mills, Kentucky, came down and received the candidate for baptism, and it was decided to organize a church there. By the way, I'm going to say something here. People were meeting, and it was decided to organize a church. It didn't take them years. Isn't that something? And by the way, how we are to do work is the way it has always been in the Bible. Anyway, this upset Baker, the bootlegger, to the point that he hired young men to disrupt the meeting. One morning, Bogard found a note under his door. The note stated that if he didn't leave the community within 24 hours, a mob would take care of him. Ben Bogard wrote this: with a prospective mob before me, I did a rash and foolish thing. I do not pretend to excuse myself for doing. I did wrong, but it worked. The wicked idea came to my mind that I knew how to shoot, having slept with Jesse James. I have related in a former article that because of that, had practiced shooting until I became an expert shot. And the wicked idea came into my mind that in all probability, they would pay well for their trouble if the mob came to get me. Remember, I was still a boy, a 20-year-old boy, and I had not developed the bump of caution that I now have. So I went to a young man friend and asked him for a pistol. He soon had one for me. I walked deliberately over to Baker's store and threw down the piece of money and said, Mr. Baker, let me have some cartridges, number 44. He handed me out a box, and I took the pistol and loaded it before him, and then put the pistol and the rest of the cartridges in my pocket and said, I received a note this morning that ordered me out of this community, and I just came over to tell you to say that those boys, that when they had come, they had better bring a wagon along with them, for they will have to be hauled away. Oh my goodness. It was during situations like this that helped Bogard have the boldness he would need to accomplish the task before him. January 15th, 1889, he was ordained to the full work of the gospel ministry. And on January 21st, 1889, he organized those who had been baptized into the Ohio Valley Church. He's organizing these churches very quickly, and they got to work. He was elected to be their pastor and stayed until he entered school in August, from September 16th, 1889 to September 11th, 1890. Bogard attended Bethel College in Russellville, Kentucky, and during this time, he became acquainted with such men as T.T. Eaton, John A. Brocious, S.H. Ford, and J.N. Hall. He had found memories of hearing the great landmarker J.R. Graves. Have you heard some of those, Brother
Yes,
Joe?
some of them, yes.
Yeah, you probably were personally there when they were preaching.
I'm not that old yet.
Okay, I'm almost done. We need to hear this, but within the convention, Bogard pastored several churches and worked as a missionary in Kentucky. After his marriage to Lynn Owen, on August 18th, 1891, he moved to Fulton, Kentucky, and then to Missouri. And in 1899, he moved to Searcy, Arkansas, and became the pastor of the First Baptist Church. In Arkansas, he became involved with Dr. W.A. Clark, editor of the Arkansas Baptist. Bogard worked with Dr. Clark for about 4 years, and it was during this time he became heavily involved in the fight against changes within the convention concerning missions. He became leader among the Landmark Baptists in Arkansas. He was one of the leaders that led the Landmark churches to pull out of the convention in Arkansas. He was a strong spokesman in the General Association and in the American Baptist Association. And by this time, Bogard was known by many great evangelists as well as a debater. His name had spread to many parts of South, including Alabama. And according to his own records, the first debate he held in Alabama was at Millport, the southern Lamar County, in April of 1908. This debate was with a C.R. Nickel, a minister in the Church of Christ. At the conclusion of 4 days of debate, Bogart wrote, "Moderate victory for the Baptists." His second debate was held January 21st, 1918 in Curtis, Alabama. Again, the debate was with the Church of Christ. The debater he was up against was J.B. Bradley. Bogard wrote, "Won an easy victory." When he finished the debate, he stayed and preached 9 more messages. And in 1921, Bogard returned to Alabama, traveled to Gouen. He debated with J.D. Tent on November 1911. He again gained many essays over the Church of Christ. Around that time, he preached revival in church in Winfield and returned 1921. But I've got to read this. This was interesting. In 1920, in the winter of 1923, Ben Bogard was asked to come to Hodges, Alabama, to hold a debate with the Church of Christ. By the way, that church, First Baptist Church in First Missionary Baptist Church in Hodges, is still there.
It used to be one of my supporting churches when I was in Florida.
Oh yeah, Brother Guitry, Marty Guitry, is pastor there.
Florida.
Was he there when you were not at that time?
No.
Oh, okay. Alabama hold the doctor with Church of Christ. There's all these Church of Christs that he was debating with, and at that time, First Missionary Baptist Church was simply called Hodges. 1923, Hodges was a Shady Grove Association. The pastor, according to the association minutes, was Elder R.N. Roberts of Vina. The members of Church of Christ wanted to debate a Baptist and insulted the neighboring Baptists because they didn't have anyone that could do it. Willie Overton shared the following story with L.D. Foreman and Ernest Payne. The way it started, Willie said, the Campbellites, that's the Church of Christ, came to our meeting. They had some members there all the time. He continued the story and developed where 2 ministers of the Church of Christ faith named Nichols, one Big Charlie and one Little Charlie. This is not the same friend as C.R. Nickel, to whom he held many debates. The minister sent his members to heckle the Baptist people in their evangelistic campaigns, challenged them, will you defend what you have been preaching? Even on the streets, they buttonholed the Baptists, boasting that they could not defend their faith. Then Mr. Nichols brought up a Baptist preacher who could barely read and write from Winfield, Alabama, to help him out, and pointed out this ignorant Baptist preacher is the average typical Baptist preacher. He said triumphantly, they don't know nothing, none of them. This was more than the people could endure. That made us bristle up. Mr. Overton commented, and we got a little bit cranky. Doc Moore was the doctor here and said, "What are we going to do?" Another citizen of the community, Mr. John Cantrell, said, "I think I know a man by the name of Bogard if we can get him." The citizens were able to reach Bogard, and he was willing to come. But when it was time for the debate had come, Charlie Nichols didn't show up. I could go on further, but it was interesting that these things happen. But as a result of Ben Bogard's work, I got to share this with you. As a result of Ben Bogard's work, the church in Alabama became one of the strongest church in Alabama, numbering over 250 members. Anyway, that was my devotion, brother. I had to share that.
Appreciate that. Yeah, the church in Hodgen. Yeah. Hodgens, Alabama, supported me in Jamaica for quite a while.
Was that before Brother Marty Guitry was there?
Yes.
Oh,
yes,
okay.
it was.
Okay.
I'm told by our producer that we're having problems getting Brother John Raish
Oh my.
on the line. So hopefully the time I get finished and ready to turn over to him, maybe we'll be able to have him on. We'll see about that, and I'll keep you posted. Now, in the last week or even in the last month, have you gone shopping and wondered about the empty shelves in the stores? Have you given much thought of it, especially concerning grocery stores? Are there items that you are used to buying that are just not available anymore? Have you gone to the meat section of your favorite grocery store and couldn't find your favorite meat, only to be told by the staff that they didn't know when they would get it back in? I suspect that you have answered yes to several, if not all of these questions. It is not just a local problem, though. I have some articles tonight that will try and shed some light on the subject, at least as far as time permits. The first article was written by Michael Schneider of The End of the American Dream. It is entitled "The Great Holiday Shortage is Coming," and this came out today. So it is hot off the press, as we say. Now, even the mainstream media is admitting the shortages are going to get even worse. Earlier this year, the talking heads on television were assuring all of us that the U.S. economy would be, quote unquote, booming by the end of 2021. Yeah, the booming is probably with it hitting the bottom. But obviously we know that hasn't happened. Instead, we are facing growing shortages and rampant inflation. In fact, one measure of inflation just hit the highest level in nearly 40 years. But a more immediate concern, at least to all of us, is the fact that shortages are intensifying all over the nation. We've never seen anything like this before. And the mainstream media is openly telling us that the worst is yet to come. For example, the following comes from an Axios article. Axios is a news outlet called "The Great Holiday Shortage." Now brace yourself. They say it's going to be hard to find everything. Not just your favorite holiday foods and hot toys and gifts, but also basic staples like coffee and footwear. Well, there goes my morning coffee every morning.
I don't drink it.
Well, I'll take your part.
Okay,
then.
brother.
So because the reason is because supply chains problems that will likely persist even as long as next spring. At least through next spring. Fall is just starting now. Mm-hmm. So through next spring would put us 9 months from now. Wow. Other mainstream media outlets are becoming quite alarmist, quote unquote, as well. In an article they posted last week, the Today Show warned that we can expect to see a shortage of canned foods during the upcoming holiday season. Rodney Holcomb, a food economist at Oklahoma State University, told Today in an email that we can expect to see a shortage of canned foods, but that this has to do more with the container than the actual food. Aluminum availability is still a concern, so it may be more difficult to find those canned, ready-to-eat items on store shelves, Holcomb said. This wasn't supposed to happen. But it is happening, and we're going to have to deal with it regardless of whether we want to or not. Meat supplies are getting tighter and tighter as well. Now, the following comes from an excellent piece written by Stephen Stanford, looking over the meat section to see if there are any deals going on in this day and age of rising meat prices. That manager came out from the back just in time for me to pelt him with a couple of questions. Asking him first, have you any difficulties in getting your meat supplies? He immediately responded to me with, I ordered 150 pounds of lunch meat this week, only to get 20 of them. Then warning me, and I've been told that it's going to get a lot worse. WTOP News in Washington, D.C. reported September the 30th, Prince George's County's public schools says it will stop handing out free suppers to some students starting next week, citing supply chain issues and national shortages. Last month, a supermarket industry insider personally informed me, and that's Michael Snyder, that supply issues are widespread across a whole host of product categories. As the American people begin to figure out what's going on, we should potentially see a wave of panic shopping like we have never listed or witnessed before. Meanwhile, the chip shortage continues to cause havoc for the entire global economy, and it isn't going to end anytime soon.
And that's not potato chips either.
That's not potato chips. According to CNBC, one expert is warning that it could even stretch beyond 2022. Excuse me. The semiconductor chip shortage that's hamstringing the production of products ranging from cars and computers to appliances and toothbrushes, and I'm assuming those are the powered ones, not manual, will extend into 2022 and potentially beyond that. The CEO of semiconductor company Marvell Technology said, as I have discussed in previous articles, this is Michael Snyder's, the chip shortage is deeply affecting thousands of other industries. Without enough chips, automakers cannot produce enough vehicles, and sales are way down as a result. New car sales plunged over the last 3 months in the United States despite strong demand, as the shortage of computer chips and other supply chain issues caused shutdowns at auto factories and choked off the supply of vehicles. General Motors reported sales fell a third from a year ago last quarter, and they were off 40% from the same quarter of 2019 before the pandemic rolled the car market. In other words, they were having trouble even before the pandemic ever came along. Sales at Stellantis, the company formed by the merger of Fiat, Chrysler, and France's PSA Group, fell 19% from a year ago and 27% from the pre-pandemic period. Unfortunately, European automakers are greatly suffering as well. British car production dropped by 27% year on year in August as a lack of semiconductors and led to a big drop in the number of vehicles exported to Australia, the U.S., and China. And this was last week, Thursday, Volkswagen, Ford, and Opel maker Stellantis announced fresh temporary closures in Germany because of the chip problem. Now, that was just last week.
Mm-hmm.
Opel is closing a plant until 2022, the longest such stoppage so far. You remember those old Opels that used to be here? You don't see them anymore.
I forgot all about that Opel.
Yeah, they weren't too popular.
No.
Here.
It's about like Studebaker.
Yeah. Or a Yugo.
Yeah.
In addition to a shortage of chips, many industries are also being plagued by a severe shortage of workers. For the first time in human history, there is a simultaneous shortage of workers all over the globe, and none of the quote-unquote experts can explain why it's happening. Earlier today, Michael Snyder said, "I was stunned to learn that the UK may need to cull up to 120,000 pigs just because there isn't enough workers to process them all." Britain may be entering a prolonged period of crisis now, one that may be on par or even exceeds the emergencies of the late 1970s. Brits face a gasoline shortage because of the lack of truck drivers, dwindling natural gas supplies, and soaring power bills. There's also been food shortages and panic buying of essential goods that have driven up prices and made the situation much worse. A more extended crisis is occurring with the country's food supply chain. The latest figures from the National Pig Association, NPA.
What? That's not NPR, is it?
No, that's not.
Are they associated? Sometimes you wonder.
I don't think so. NPA warns that 120 pigs will be culled because of labor shortage. And I'm wondering if they say culled, they're going to get rid of them. In other words, kill them. A lack of labor is also one of the reasons why dozens and dozens of container ships are waiting off of our coastlines, waiting to be unloaded right now. Dozens of cargo ships anchored off the coast of Los Angeles and New York on both sides of the country face shocking wait times of up to 4 weeks. And railroads and trucking routes are hopelessly clogged due to a lack of manpower to unload goods. With an expert warning that the government needs to intervene or face spiraling inflation and unemployment. So we find ourselves in the middle of an epic supply chain disaster. And our leaders seem to be utterly clueless as far as coming up with any solutions to get us out of this mess. Michael Snyder said, "I have been warning about shortages and runaway inflation for a very long time. And now even the mainstream media is admitting that things are going to get even worse in the months ahead." I don't know whether your wife has said anything about it or not, but I've been told by my wife and my daughter that some things are getting pretty scarce in the stores. And almost every time that my wife goes shopping, she comes back to tell me, well, such and such a store didn't have this. They had it last week, but they don't have it now.
A lot of drive-throughs, Brother Joe. They put signs that certain items, they don't have those certain items. I went to, and I love those jalapeno pepper, the poppers. Can't get them at Arby's anymore because from what I was told, the supplier does not have them. Little thing like that.
Yes.
It's interesting. I was just, as you were talking, I think everything is going to where you look in the book of Revelation where it said that so much wheat is going to cost so much money. The poor are going to get poorer and the rich are going to get richer.
Right. There is take these pigs for example. If the farmer was to hold on to those pigs, and he had a lot of them, well, his feed bill is going to continue to climb, and he will pay much higher prices for the same amount of feed that he was before. So it would soon get to where the farmer wouldn't be able to feed his stock.
Mm-hmm.
So what is he going to do? I don't know.
Yeah, I just found that verse where it talked about come and see and beheld a black horse. He sat on a pair of balances in his hand. And basically a measure of wheat is going to be like a day's wage to buy that. I'll tell you, if it come down to it, I could kill a deer and I could skin it, but not a lot of people can do that.
That's right. That's right.
So,
Especially people in large metro areas like Nashville here.
mm-hmm.
You let the food start getting scarce. And
Yep.
we think that there's crime and problems now. Just wait until this happens. It's really going to get bad.
Yeah, you know, something interesting. It's how people have not needed God, and now I think He's beginning to turn the tide. He can control the computer system.
Right.
He can control it, and it's when you think about even during the tribulation time, He can control the weapons, all these things. So. You know, I still go back. I said we just need to do what we need to do scripturally. Seek ye first the kingdom of God. He'll take care of our daily needs, but it might be hard for those daily needs, being we've never been used to that before.
Right. Well, I addressed this last Sunday, I believe it was. You made the statement from the pulpit in your message that we don't need to worry.
Yeah.
God will take care of us. And then Jeremy said the same thing.
Yeah.
Well, my grandson, he took that, you understand, and Jeremy understands, that doesn't mean that we just sit down
No.
and expect God to hand us things on a silver platter, so to speak.
Yeah.
He expects us to do what
Absolutely.
we can.
Absolutely.
And many times, that's how He does provide for us.
Oh yeah. That's what is it? The adage that if a man does not work, he doesn't eat. Now look what's happening. Plenty of jobs out there, and people don't want to work. So look what's happened to the economy. It's like the truck drivers. You get truck drivers that are not working. They can't get the gas in, so. You know, like I said, you know, if we're doing what we're supposed to do, we shouldn't have anything to worry as long as we are not just sitting back and expecting God to just put it on a golden platter. I mean, We've gone too long with that mentality, Brother Joe.
Right, absolutely. God gives us the ability to do things. He gives us the mental capacity to do things. And pardon the personal reference here, but when I was going to school and I was working full time and going to school full time, things would get pretty tight. And sometimes there would be more month than there was money. You ever been there before? And I was always trying to trust God to make the ends meet. And inevitably, He would provide. But you know how He would provide for it? He would provide extra hours for me to work.
Yep.
And that would be what we would be able to use to make up the deficit.
Yes. I'll use this as an example. Back when I was in Alabama, I would go hunting, and that would be meat for the freezer,
Right.
And of course, you would go early in the morning. If you've ever been hunting, it's early in the morning, and then we would have meat that would, for the most part, that would get us through. And I remember when I resigned from church in Alabama, I had no idea where our supply would come from, but God provided that supply with the deer meat. So if I have to, I can wring a chicken's neck. I can do what I need to do, So
Yeah, sometimes it takes effort on our part. I remember when the Lord called me to go to New York. We were living in Ohio, and we lived out on a farm in an old farmhouse. Well, we took advantage of that. We had a lot of chickens. So we grow things in the garden and all of that. And when the Lord called me to New York, we had a lot of things to do before we could ever leave that farmstead. And we had, I don't remember how many, my wife could tell you, how many chickens that we had to kill and dress and put in the freezer before we ever left. And I want you to know, through that was, we made it to New York in late October. And in early November, we were able to get a place to live, and food was short. Not because food was short, but the money to buy food was short. Mm-hmm. So I tell you what, those chickens really did come in handy. They tasted pretty good.
I have to chuckle. My grandmother used to kill her own chickens, and she would cut their heads off. And of course, you've seen them where they run around in the yard. That was a form of entertainment. And then we could take the feet, and we could chase the girl cousins around with the feet, and pull that tendon in there. But those days among a lot of people, they have no idea what we're talking about, Brother Joe.
Right. Yeah.
Hey, there's Brother John.
Oh, we see Brother John finally got on. Welcome, brother.
Yeah.
Here you had problems getting on to us tonight.
He didn't have the problems. We had the problems.
Windows decided to start updating my computer.
We had the problems. Okay. Well, regardless of where the problems came from, I'm glad you're on, brother.
We're always glad you're on, brother. We're going to call him Big Head.
I remember when I was growing up with chickens.
We're going to call you Big Head because that's the only thing we see is your head right there. Talking head, is that what you just said, Brother Joe?
Yeah, that's what they call them, talking heads.
Just don't call it Max Headroom.
Hey, there he is.
There we go. All right, welcome aboard, brother.
Thank you.
He just moved it back again.
If I could find something I could set it on.
Say again?
Hold on. If I could find something I could set it on, that it wouldn't go anywhere.
All right. While you're solving that logistical problem, we'll go on. I got another article also written by Michael Snyder, and we're not going to get through all of this, but it's entitled "The Growing Global Energy Crisis Will Compound Everything Shortage." This is going to be a one tough winter. On top of everything else we're facing, there is a very alarming energy crisis. It's rapidly growing all over the world. Supplies of natural gas and coal are getting tighter by the day. And this is dramatically affecting manufacturing and major exporters such as China. So that means that less stuff is going to be coming across the ocean in the months ahead. And that means that the shortages in our stores that we're already seeing are going to be getting worse. This really is happening, and we're going to have to deal with it. Of course, store shelves are already pretty bare all around the country. They're calling it the quote-unquote the everything shortage. And it's been intensifying with each passing week. I'm going to skip. He talks about a local Piggly Wiggly where he lives, and the store owner told him that there was a shortage of Gatorade. That was one of the, go figure, Gatorade. And it was all, the shelf where it was almost empty. And the store owner said, who would think that Gatorade would be a problem to get in the store?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
But apparently it is. And it is something that we have been wrestling with for quite some time, said Jeff Joseph, store owner. And Michael Snyder said he gets reports like this all the time. He had one reader that is located in Pennsylvania. She was deeply alarmed by the lack of milk and dog food during her last visit to the supermarket. And then he quotes her as saying that she went to the largest giant supermarket. Now, this was the name of the supermarket in just a little ways outside of Harrisburg, Pennsylvania. She said she was at the milk section, and there were maybe 10 empty rows with no milk in them. Her husband likes chocolate milk, but they only had one brand. And wouldn't you know, that probably was not the one he liked. She said she was looking for dog treats, and she found out they had moved them to another aisle, and there were not as many brands. She said they're taking dog food bags and putting them out to the front of the shelf to make them full, but there are no bags behind them. I used to work in a grocery store in stock, and if we were short of an item, that's what we would do. We would pull all the cans up, and right on the very face of it, it looked like it's full. But
It's front facing.
Front facing. Yeah. And but you pull one out and look behind it, there's nothing there. It's empty. She said they like an Arizona canned tea, but she had to settle for a big bottle instead. Canned tea is hard to get. And then she said the aisle with the toilet paper and towels were half empty. And she said she wanted some Nutter
please
Butter
don't
cookies.
start that again.
Nutter butters.
Yeah. She said she liked Nutter Butter cookies, but they didn't have any.
I'm going to have a Nutter Butter breakdown.
Now, down in southwestern Arkansas,
Oh, man.
it sounds like things are even worse. He said we'd been warned that there would be a shortage of toys during this holiday season. And one of my readers, this is Michael Snyder's readers, says that she's already noticing a huge change. And she says this. Said it's horrifying to walk through a Dollar General store down here in southwestern Arkansas. There are bare shelves. The toy aisle, normally flooded this time of year in anticipation of Christmas, there's nothing there like what would normally be there or should be there. Brookshire's is the primary market down here. They do not have frozen turkeys. And the frozen chicken that we purchased, Tyson chicken, she said, I bought a 5-pound flat of drumsticks. There were still feathers on some of the pieces of chicken. I had to wash, pluck, and wow, just wow. What the factories must be like these days is all I'm saying. Well, we haven't seen this type of thing before, have we? And the experts are telling us in the months ahead, this is going to be even worse. And even big corporate news outlets are constantly running stories about the shortages. The following, let me see if I got time to do that. Yeah, I got time. The following is an excerpt from one report that was entitled, America is Running Out of Everything. And I'm not sure what this, who wrote this article, but it's written in first person. Said, I visited CVS last week to pick up some at-home COVID-19 tests. They'd been sold out for a week, an employee told me. So I asked about paper towels. We're out of those too, he said. Try Walgreens. I drove to a Walgreens that had paper towels. But when I asked the pharmacist to fill some very common prescriptions, he told me the store had run out. Try the Target up the road, he suggested. Target's pharmacy had the meds, but its front area was alarmingly barren, like the canned food section of a grocery store 1 hour before a hurricane makes landfall. Now, in the past, any shortages were always very temporary. You go back a few hours later or the next day and the shelf is full, but not so now. In fact, the same article that Michael Snyder just quoted openly admitted that this is the economy now. Mm-hmm. 1 hour errands are multi-hour odysseys. Next day deliveries are becoming day after next deliveries. That car part you need, it'll take an extra week, sorry. The book you were looking for, come back in November. That baby crib you bought, make it December. New home improvement job that requires several construction workers. Pray for 2022. Even the usual optimistic talking heads on television are warning us that the colossal problems that have caused this epic global supply chain crisis are not going to be resolved for the foreseeable future. Meanwhile, Michael said, as I've quoted above, a very frightening global energy crisis threatens to take the everything shortage, quote unquote, to an entirely new level. On Thursday, and this was last week, I believe as well, the Wall Street Journal ran an article entitled Natural Gas Shortage Sets Off Scramble Ahead of Winter. And that really freaked a lot of people out. All over the planet, nations are feverishly trying to secure sufficient supplies of natural gas for the months ahead. Normally, there is a spike of demand in the middle of winter, but at this moment in the fall, before winter is even getting here, even close, we're nowhere close to that point. In fact, summer just officially ended a couple of weeks ago. So if things are this bad already, what are we going to be facing in a few months? At the same time, there's a very serious shortage of coal. It's pushing the prices up to absolutely absurd levels. Australia's Newcastle thermal coal, the global benchmark, is trading at $202 a metric ton, 3 times higher than at the end of 2019. Global production of coal, which generates around 40% of the world's electricity, is about 5% below pre-pandemic levels. My daughter works for a company that provides HR services for large corporations. And one of the clients that she has that she and her coworkers service is involved in coal mining. They just recalled 300 people back to work after being laid off for several months. And and of course everybody's got to get their benefits all taken care of again. And so that means the phone is ringing off with a hook for her and her companions. But the shortage is a real problem. In Europe, the rising prices for coal and other energy resources have hit factory output and driven household energy bills higher. Major coal importers in Asia, including Japan and South Korea, are jostling to secure supplies. We've never seen an energy crisis this severe in modern times, and it's already having a dramatic impact on manufacturing in China. Well, if things are this bad and going to be affecting China, it means that China's going to be exporting a lot of less stuff to us, and our store shelves will continue to get barer and barer. Meanwhile, the global crisis is already spreading to other economies. And it goes on to talk about Brazil, and it has to ration power, and if the power imports from Uruguay and Argentina already increased, and it just goes on. Listen, folks, we do not live on an island. Not at all. India, a power crisis there. And so the energy crisis is literally spreading all over the world. Michael Snyder ends this particular article, said, whatever you think that you're going to need for the winter months, go out, get it now. The shortages are just the beginning, and the global economy will never be the same after this. Well, we're going to take a break right now and have our intermission. Don't go away. We'll be right back. Take it away, Jamie. welcome you back to our final session of the program. And is Brother Dan Curtis on with us as yet? Jamie?
Yeah, while we're waiting.
No, sir, I have not seen him connect yet.
Okay.
You got to pray for Brother Jamie. He is dealing with all kinds of learning experiences.
He says he's in the green room, a.k.a. timeout. I'm trying to figure out where he's at.
I thought the green room was my car.
All right, Brother Barney, I'm going to mute you if you don't be quiet now.
Brother, got to have a lot of got to have some jocularity.
Well, while that Jamie is battling that technical problem, we have Brother John Raish with us back again. He is one of our guest co-hosts, and as always, he has some things for us. So we're turning it over to you, Brother John.
And he has been sitting patiently waiting.
Yes, he has.
Waiting.
Thank you, Brother John.
Thank you, Brother John.
Sorry about that. Not a problem. Today we're going to speak. We're going to speak about evolution. The modern worldview gives a free pass to evolution. It is taught in school as if it is science, and the media treats it as a fact. Neither is true. Modern culture is implementing something we used to call brainwashing. Today we'll give a little scrutiny with two things that liberals cannot stand: facts and logic. Evolution claims to be a science. But what is science? Merriam-Webster defines it as a knowledge about or study of the natural world based on facts learned through experiments and observation. What is theory? An idea that is suggested or presented as possibly true, but that is not known or proven to be true. What is a belief? It's a feeling of being sure that something or someone exists, or that something is true. What is a religion? That is an interest, a belief, or an activity that is very important to a person or group. There's a little formula that evolutionists like to use to explain how it works. It's a simple equation. It's also a foolish equation, but it's the best thing that they can come up with. The great thing is that by reducing it down to a simple problem, all you have to do is disprove any part of the equation, and it comes apart. At a later time, we will debunk the chance part. For right now, we're going to debunk only the time part. They claim the world is over 4.8 billion years old. They claim this with a straight face. We know the Earth to be 6,000 years old. But they claim that the Bible is filled with errors and cannot be trusted. So in fairness, we will use something else against them. Science. Because if we are correct, and we are, then science can only stand to prove our case for it. And it does. Proof number 10. We're counting backwards. Too few supernova remnants. According to astronomical observations, galaxies like our own experience about one supernova, which is a violently exploding star, every 25 years. The gas and dust remnants from such explosions, like the Crab Nebula, expand outward rapidly and should remain visible for over a million years. Yet, the nearby parts of our galaxy in which we could observe such gas and dust shells contain only about 200 supernova remnants. That number is consistent with only about 7,000 years worth of supernovas. Number 9. The sun is shrinking too quickly. And someone might go, what do you mean? The sun is burning a lot of gas to put this heat and everything out, and it's eating itself up. Now, what does the shrinkage of the sun have to do with creation and evolution? Obviously, the sun was larger in the past than it is now by 0.1% per century. A creationist who may believe that the world was created approximately 6,000 years ago has very little to worry about. The sun would have been only 6% larger at creation than it is now. However, if the rate of change of solar radius remained constant 1,000 years ago, the sun would be twice the size it is now. One could hardly imagine any life could exist under such altered conditions. Yet 100,000 years is a minute amount of time when dealing with evolutionary time scales. Now, how far back in the past would one have to go to find a sun so large that its surface touches the surface of the Earth? Solar radius changes 2.5 feet per hour. Distance of the sun to the Earth is 93 million miles. There are 5,280 feet in 1 mile. Assuming by uniformation type reasoning that the rate of shrinkage has not changed with time, then the surface of the sun would touch the surface of the Earth at approximately 20 million BC. However, the time scales required for organic evolution range from 500 million years ago to 2,000 million years. It's amazing. All this evolutionary development, except for the last 20 million years, took place on a planet that was inside the sun. By 20 million BC, all of the evolution had occurred except the final stage, the evolution of the primate into man. Proof number 8. The moon's orbit is decaying too fast. As the moon induces tides on the Earth, the planet rotates faster than the moon's orbit, and the tidal bulges get ahead of the moon. They then pull forward on the moon, causing it to gain orbital energy and move away from the Earth. The effect is small, but measurable. The moon moves away from the Earth by about 1.5 inches every year. The recession effect would have been larger in the past because if the moon were closer to the Earth, the tides would be larger. If we extrapolate this effect into a hypothetical past, you'll find that the moon would have been touching Earth 1.4 million or 1.4 billion years ago. So Earth and the moon cannot be older than that. Yet secular scientists claim that Earth and the moon are over 4 billion years old. Point number 7. The Earth's magnetic field is decaying too fast. The total energy stored in the Earth's magnetic field, the dipole and non-dipole, is decreasing with a half-life of 1,465 years. Evolutionary theorists explain that this rapid decrease, as well as how the Earth could have maintained its magnetic field for billions of years, are very complex and inadequate. A much better creationist theory exists. It is straightforward, based on sound physics, and explains many features of the field. Its creation, rapid reversals during the Genesis flood, surface intensity decreases until the time of Christ, and a steady decay since then. This theory matches paleomagnetic, historic, and present data, most startlingly with evidence for rapid changes. The main result is that the field's total energy, not surface intensity, has always decayed at least as fast as now. At that rate, the field could not be more than 20,000 years old. Point number 6. There's not enough mud on the seafloor. Each year, water and winds erode about 20 billion tons of dirt and rock from the continents and deposit into the ocean. This material accumulates as loose sediment on the main way known to remove the sediment from the ocean floor is by plate tectonic subduction. That is, the seafloor slides slowly, a few centimeters a year, beneath the continents, taking some sediment with it. According to secular scientific literature, that process presently removes only 1 billion tons per year. As far as anyone knows, the other 19 billion tons per year simply accumulate. At that rate, erosion would deposit the present mass of sediment in less than 12 million years. Yet, according to evolutionary theory, erosion and plate subduction have been going on as long as the oceans have existed, an alleged 3 billion years. If that were so, the rates above imply that the oceans would be massively choked with sediment dozens of kilometers deep. An alternative or a creationist explanation is that the erosion from the waters of the Genesis flood running off the continents deposited the present amount of sediment within a short time, about 5,000 years ago. Point number 5. Biological material decays too fast. Natural radioactivity, mutations, and decay degrade DNA and other biological materials rapidly. Measurements of the mutation rate of mitochondrial DNA recently forced researchers to revise the age of the mitochondrial Eve from a theorized 200,000 years down to possibly, get this, as low as 6,000 years. DNA experts insist that DNA cannot exist in natural environments longer than 10,000 years, yet intact strands of DNA appear to have been recovered from fossils allegedly much older. Neanderthal bones, insects in amber, and even from dinosaur fossils. Bacteria, allegedly 250 million years ago, apparently have revived with no DNA damage. Soft tissue and blood cells from a dinosaur have astonished experts. Number 4. Fossil radioactivity shortens these geological ages, quote unquote, to just a few years. Radiohalos are rings of color formed around microscopic bits of radioactive minerals in rock crystals. They are fossil evidence of radioactive decay. Squashed polonium-210 radiohalos indicate that Jurassic, Triassic, and Eocene formations in the Colorado Plateau were deposited within months of one another, not hundreds of millions of years apart as required by the conventional time scale. Polonium-210 has a half-life of 138 days. Orphan polonium-218 radiohalos have no evidence of their other elements, implied accelerated nuclear decay and very rapid formation of associated materials. Polonium-218 has a half-life of only 186 seconds. Here's this is an element that a lot of people are at least familiar with. There's too much carbon-14 in deep geologic strata. With their short 5,700-year half-life, no carbon-14 atoms should exist in any carbon older than 250,000 years. It has proven impossible to find any natural source of carbon below the Pleistocene or the Ice Age strata that does not contain significant amounts of carbon-14, even though such strata are supposed to be millions or billions of years old. Conventional carbon-14 laboratories have been aware of this abnormality since the early 1980s, yet they've striven to eliminate it, but they're unable to account for it. Lately, the world's best such laboratory, which has learned during 2 decades of low C14 measurements how not to contaminate specimens externally, under contract to creationists, confirmed such observation for coal samples and even for a dozen diamonds, which cannot be contaminated with recent carbon. These constitute very strong evidence that the Earth is only thousands and not billions of years old. Number 2, there's not enough Stone Age skeletons. Evolutionary anthropologists now say that Homo sapiens existed for at least 185,000 years before agriculture began, during which time the world population of humans was roughly constant between 1 and 10 million. All that time they are burying their dead, often with artifacts. By that scenario, they would have buried at least 8 billion bodies, if the evolutionary time scale, and certainly the buried artifacts would. Yet only a few thousand have been found. This implies that the Stone Age was much shorter than evolutionists think, perhaps only a few hundred years in many areas. And the last one, you're welcome, hey, history is too short. According to evolutionists, Stone Age Homo sapiens existed for 190,000 years before beginning to make written records about 4,000 or 5,000 years ago. Yet prehistoric men built megalithic monuments, made beautiful cave paintings, and kept records of lunar phases. Why would he wait 2,000 centuries before using the same skills to record history? The biblical time scale is much more likely. 10 reasons that science proves the Earth is nowhere near as old as they claim it is. And they claim it's that old because it has to be for all the garbage that they say happened with us and our changes and all like that. The end.
You said something about sediment accumulation there. Can you repeat that one again for me?
Sure. 1 second.
In my mind about what about the delta areas like the Nile when it empties into the Mediterranean, the Mississippi when it empties into the Gulf, and the Tigris, Euphrates rivers when they empty into their Gulf. It has been proven that the current shoreline is sometimes even miles from the original shoreline. I wonder what they have to say about that.
Well, two things. One, there's a difference between a river and the sea. We're talking about if you go out in the middle of the Pacific Ocean, it's not going to have any delta, any of these of the ocean floor. The average depth of all the sediment in the whole ocean is less than 400 meters. The main way known to remove the sediment from the ocean floor is by plate tectonic subduction. That is, seafloor slides slowly, a few centimeters a year, beneath the continents, taking some sediment with it. According to secular scientific literature, that process presently removes only 1 billion tons per year. As far as anyone knows, the other 19 billion tons per year simply accumulate. At that rate, erosion would deposit the present massive sediment in less than 12 million years. Now, why is all that extra sediment? I'll tell you why. It's called the flood. That moved a lot of things around.